Hey, this is Listen and Be Heard Radio. My name is Tony Robles, um, and welcome to the Audio Garden. If you're joining us on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button to get updates and to hear future interviews with authors and writers. Today we have a very special guest. I'm really excited about our guest today. Um, Her name is Donna Janell Bowman, and I'm going to read from her bio. She is an award-winning author of books for young readers, including Wings of an Eagle, that was recently published. Wings of an Eagle, The Gold Medal Dreams of Billy Mills, a book that she co-authored, as well as Step Right Up, How Doc and Jim Key Taught the World About Kindness, as well as Abraham Lincoln's Dueling Words, King of the Tightrope, When the Great Blondin Ruled Niagara, among others. Donna's books have garnered such accolades as starred reviews, state book awards, and awards and honors from NCTE, NCSS, ALA, Oprah, Oprah Daily, Library of Congress, Great Reads, Best of the Year list, and a lot more. And she is armed with an MFA in creative writing from Vermont College of Fine Arts. Donna Janell Bowman. Donna, thank you for being with us.
Thank
Uh,
you so much for having me.
so you're armed with an MFA from Vermont College of Fine Arts, which happens to be my alma mater. You were in the young adult or the children's program there.
That's correct. And interestingly, I was already published when I entered the program. But yes, it's the same type of curriculum, just different audiences that we're writing for.
It's a really good program, and I was really happy that I got a chance to be a part of it. Now, I was reading about you on your website, and you describe yourself as a ranch kid. And in reading through it, it seems like the love of animals plays a big part in your life. And in reading the bio, you were raised around horses, goats, gerbils, and a skunk named Stinky. How does that part of your life inform? Because that goes back to being a child. How does that inform or influence you as a writer?
Oh, that's an amazing question. First, you forgot the cattle and the turkeys and the ducks and the geese and the guinea hens and yes, all of it,
They're gonna
dogs and
get,
cats.
you know what, for that faux pas, they're gonna roust me. But yeah, that's the thing that it kind of popped out. Wanted to ask you about,
Right.
you know,
And the pet skunk named Stinky.
Stinky.
Absolutely. We
Yeah.
had him for a very long time. Yes. How has it informed my writing? Well, the first stories I wrote were about animals, not surprisingly. My favorite books when I was a kid were about animals. Black Beauty, not surprisingly, a lot of stories about horses. National Velvet, my friend Flicka, the Old Yeller. Oh my goodness, Where the Red Fern Grows. Oh yes, any book that featured an animal and made me cry was like that's my kind of jam.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Growing up with animals taught me so much about responsibility and compassion and empathy, and that has informed me as a human being, and absolutely as a writer. Because whether I'm writing fiction or nonfiction, I'm developing a character on the page.
Mhm.
And even an antagonist has to be approached with some compassion because something or some event or some experience made them who they were.
Yeah.
So, yes, my roots are with animals and it has informed everything in my life.
I always go to a quote by Maxim Gorky, the great Russian writer, who said in approaching writing for children, writing children's stories, he says that you write for children the same way that you would write for an adult, only better.
Yeah,
Do you agree with that?
absolutely. Absolutely. And because we write usually shorter text, who was it that said, was it Mark Twain that said I could write this longer, but it would take me, I could write this shorter, but it would take me twice as long.
That sounds like something he would say.
You're right, right? I've definitely found that to be true.
Mhm. At the age of 6, you were involved in a car accident, and I have an affinity with you with that because I had been in a car accident as well. Spent a little time in the hospital as a kid, and you suffered some injuries in that. Your stories invoke a great deal of empathy, as you mentioned. Can you talk about empathy in your work and where where that sense of empathy comes from? Because that, really does come with many writers. They comes from pain or whatever the source might be.
Right. Well, let me clarify first of all, that accident when I was a child was I was on a bicycle and
Mhm.
had a head-on collision with a car.
Oh, okay, okay.
So there was a car involved, but it was from a bicycle, and knocked out all my teeth and broke my jaw and all that. But anyway, um, empathy. I always tell people that because we write for children or because we are writing the human experience, we are in the business of empathy. We
Mm,
truly are in the business of empathy, especially with young readers.
yeah.
So absolutely. So the subjects that I choose, I'm never really sure why they call to me, except that I have learned enough to know that they speak to something deep within me. And that's part of the empathy going outward and the empathy, coming inward toward the child I was.
Mm.
So all the stories I write somehow fill something in for my inner child, if that makes any sense at all. Yeah.
So in order to fill those things, you collaborate with those things that might be uncomfortable, those things from your past, those things that touch you. And through that, I guess you forge a vision and you forge your own voice, you know.
Well, sure. When we're writing narratives with
Mm.
a character with a character arc, right, where there's a theme involved, they are overcoming obstacles, and
Mhm.
there isn't a human being on the planet who hasn't overcome obstacles, small and large, from various experiences.
Mhm.
And that informs the ideas that call to me the most. It's sort of mystical in a way. Never really sure until I'm into it, and then I think, oh, that's why I was
Yeah.
so interested in this story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which leads me to my next question. Your books tackle subjects of people having to overcome some kind of obstacle, be it racism or ostracism. What have been outside of the bike accident as a child, have there been any things that you've had to overcome to, let's say, become a writer, where there are some things that were holding you back? I mean, oftentimes I hear of people talking about this thing called imposter syndrome or any number of things.
Mhm.
Can you think of anything that you had to deal with and how you dealt with it?
Oh my goodness. You're gonna make me really think. I think because there's just so much that could be said.
Hmm.
Like I said, we've all faced obstacles in our lives toward any number of goals that we're after, or wishes, or desires, or whatever is beyond our grasp. To get there, we have to conquer the demons, internal and external. That's part of just life. To be a writer, I wanted to be a writer since I was a child, sitting
Hmm.
in a tree with my notebook and a pen. In fact, I was on the ranch this morning, and I walked out there with my boyfriend. I said, right over there used to be my tree with my branch, and that's where I would sit. The obstacle when I was a child was just believing that writers were only rich white men sitting on street corners drinking coffee with
Yeah.
berets and turtlenecks. That was the only kind of writer I'd ever heard of. I never
Yeah.
thought that would be, ranch kid from Central Texas. And then, of course, when you grow up, you've got the real life. You've got bills that have to be paid, and writing is not necessarily a lucrative career for anybody listening, considering quitting your day job to become a writer. Don't do it. Write on the side, make your mark, get your feet in, and yeah. Obstacles. Gosh, there have been family obstacles, which every family has. There have been relationship obstacles. There have been financial obstacles. Right, just the obstacles of life. Not one big thing that sent me over. I just knew as an adult it was time to go back to my roots of writing, which is what uh, my writing genes, so to speak, sort of took root on the ranch in all that open space and available time without electronics and screens and
Well,
distraction.
that's a beautiful metaphor, the root you're saying, going back to the roots of writing where, it was a tree, really. You were in a tree writing those first stories. I live in North Carolina by way of the San Francisco Bay Area, And on our program, we have talked to many authors who would be considered regional. People like Ron Rash, for instance, who is a real huge literary presence in the Carolinas and Appalachia. I know that you're from Texas, but your work isn't really restricted from geographically. But is there a part of you that what is the Texas part of you that is in your writing, if that question makes any sense? Because there's a piece of like the things that I write, regardless of where I am, the Bay Area somehow comes out a little bit to one extent or another. Um, if you can think of it, I mean, you don't have to answer it. I mean, it's kind of
Oh,
off the wall question.
I want to be very careful because I'm not very happy with my state at the
Yeah,
moment.
yeah,
Um, we won't get into political discussions, but in general, I think Texans by nature are a come and take it kind of have a come and take it kind of mentality, good or bad, maybe a determination, a persistence.
hmm,
That certainly has been a requirement for my career to just not give up because I've certainly been knocked down a lot, even with my writing and all the rejections that every writer faces. Um, those self-doubt thoughts that invade our brains all of the time, and that imposter syndrome that you're talking about, absolutely.
yes.
So yeah, that's a hard question to answer because I'm in Central Texas, so I'm just outside of Austin. So I'm not like you'll notice I don't have a deep Texas accent because of where I grew up.
Hmm,
If I grew up in West Texas or East Texas, you would hear it in my voice more. We grew up so exposed to cultural Austin.
mhm.
Uh, so I would let me just summarize it by saying probably just that persistence and determination and the never give up attitude that Texas is sort of known for.
Well, it's good that you brought that up because, I guess, place, setting is a determinant in many ways. Ron Rash, again, who I'd already mentioned, I think he had said something. He said that geography was destiny in one of his stories,
Mm.
and that
Yeah.
people in the mountains, they have a sense of being enclosed. There's this protective thing, but yet there's a sense of isolation, and you have to be more. You become more, I guess, dependent on others. You become more acute, you become more aware of the need to having a community, whereas in an open place like Texas, like where you're from or where other people from in different parts of the state, that's good to know because people think that it's a monolith. And I mean, I've been to Texas once. I was at the Dallas Fort Worth airport and I stayed 3 hours, but I didn't make it outside. I didn't make it outside. But I want to kind of get into the story that you wrote, uh, yeah, you co-wrote with Billy Mills. I happen to have just walked into that story or into that book at a local bookstore. I had seen the footage by accident several years ago of his race, and it was one of the most prodigious things I'd ever seen. It moved me quite deeply, and I felt a connection with him because on three levels. Number one, it happened in 1964, which is the year I happened to have been born. Uh, Number two, that's when Muhammad Ali, who was Cassius Clay, won the heavyweight title. He was my hero. And did I say there were three things? Um, and yeah, just seeing that play out was just seeing that just it moved me. It moved me deeply. I mean, it was just really something. And what I wanted to ask you was, um, what got you interested in his story?
Oh yeah, this is interesting. And also not. I was researching for different books in 2014 and 15. I had been commissioned to write four other books, not related, well, peripherally related to Billy, but I stumbled upon mention of Billy. He was not supposed to be part of these books. And there was something about just the summary about Billy's story, about how he had overcome poverty and being orphaned as a child and racism and health challenges from the Pine Ridge Reservation to Olympic gold medal just captured me. and I had to learn more. So I'm working on these other books and on the side researching Billy Mills because I just couldn't get him out of my head. I think in retrospect, the reason that his story drew to me, why I was drawn to his story was twofold. Number one, he was a prime example of an underdog facing all of these obstacles and succeeding. So in the back of my mind, I was able to say, well, wait, if he could succeed against all of that, first of all, who am I to complain about my struggles, right? And if he can do it with his goal, why couldn't I do it with mine?
Hmm.
And then the other side of that, oh my goodness, am I going to forget what I just was thinking about? Oh, I apologize. The other part of it was in my research, learning so much more about Native American history and how
Hmm.
the US responded to indigenous peoples back in the 18th century, 19th century, 20th century, even today, I became incensed that I had been lied to in school. So this combination of real curiosity about Billy's journey as an individual, and then this history that I was not aware of, that I had been misled about, infuriated me. So these two powers like collided within me, and I thought I have got to pursue this story because others need to know Billy's story, and by learning Billy's story it could introduce them to the broader history of the Native American people and how generational trauma is trickling down into their communities even still today.
Yes, because you had mentioned something that, you were researching, you were commissioned to do other books, and you know, in your research, he was mentioned, but there wasn't a lot. And so it led you on this quest for learning about him, which brings me to the book where there's a scene in the book where there's the Olympic team uh, taking pictures, and he's not supposed to be in the picture. So this this exclusion that he went through, um, it's just a real telling story about him and how he he rose to this kind of international figure, but his real race started way before the gun sounded. What was it like? I know that you had spent a lot of time with him. I guess you had traveled to California, and what was that? What was that like?
Learning about his story from
Yeah,
him.
just being with him because he credits you. I mean, when I talked to him and interviewed him, he credited you for playing a huge role in being able to bridge truth and the oral tradition with trying to get it to make sense on the page. What was that like?
Well, first, it might be interesting to know how I ended up in his living room in January of 2020.
Hmm.
As I mentioned, I had discovered him back in 2014 or 2015. Uh, I'd done as much research as I possibly could. And by the end of 2015, I had a first draft of a picture book biography.
Mm.
But as a white woman, I was not going out to try to publish this story without his approval and his feedback, because that just wouldn't have been right. I wasn't going to be another person to appropriate a Native story. So I went on a 4.5 year journey of my own to try to secure an interview with Billy. It did take 4.5 years, almost 50 emails, text messages, social media messages. Practically carrier pigeons were sent out. Please talk to me.
Oh, that's great. That's
And
great.
then finally, right before the pandemic, we didn't know what was coming. Pat Mills reached out and said, Billy has a very short window in January when he will be home, and you're welcome to come on this particular day. And I said, I will be there. I happened to have a son who was then a freshman in college on the track and field team as a thrower. He wasn't a runner, but he went with me because certainly my participation in all those track meets since he was in middle school became like an incubator for this story in a way. I could, at least with the settings and potential obstacles that Billy faced. So we sat in Billy and Pat's living room all day with a recorder going, and I recorded this conversation. I took 4 pages of questions to ask Billy and never looked at my pages once.
Mm.
It's just wide open, and he just shared his stories. And it was it was the most magical day I've ever spent with a human being. He took us upstairs to show us his memorabilia. He put his gold medal around my neck and practically made me faint. I was
Oh,
sort of, what's happening here? It was amazing. I got to know him better as a person. This made all the difference in the world to the manuscript that I had written and rewritten and revised, and all that research I had done. There's nothing like sitting across a table, sitting next to a person and hearing their stories, because you hear from their heart. There were tears, there was laughter, there was a real intimate opening of information. And by the end of our day together, we had agreed, let's collaborate. So I was able to take the stories that he'd given me and continue our conversation by Zoom and phone and text and emails. And I tweaked, rewrote the manuscript, sent every change through Billy and his wife for approval, would continually go back to them and say, what did you say about this? What was the detail here, to make sure this was authentic? I read a lot of poetry while I was rewriting this story, especially Native American poets, and beyond, James Baldwin, Walt Whitman. I was just absorbing a lot of poetry, because in the oral histories with Native American people, so many metaphors are used. It's beautiful and powerful and painful and exquisite, all of this at the same time. So I wanted to infuse the language of this book with that, a bit of that tradition of metaphorical language and lyrical language.
yeah, he had mentioned that when I spoke with Billy. It seemed like it was the collaboration on your part, trying to take all of this information and trying to present it to the world in a way in which would each word would have been a beat of his wing or the beat of his heart. It was almost like, I guess maybe you were a transcriber of the heart in a
It
sense
it
in that way.
did, as I think back, I had spent so much time in his story and invested in decades of interviews with him by other organizations and people, print, film, audio, and just absorbed his voice as much as I could. So in many ways, his story sort of channeled through me,
Mm,
right? In a way, I had the writing skills to take his story and he just sort of inserted his story through me,
hmm.
and I was able to put words on the page.
Well, that's I guess you can say that you're a poet in that sense because
Huh.
that's what
That's a good
poets do.
compliment. Thank you.
That's what poets do. And you read Native American poets to kind of get the feeling, and then also James Baldwin. And I mean, kind of going to Baldwin in all of this, when we were talking about the fact that Billy had gone through a lot of challenges in his life, discrimination, and just all of those things, and that the fact that you were very incensed as an author, as just a human being, as to what the Native Americans had all gone through, it just kind of goes back to what Baldwin said. It's like not only were Black people or people of color victimized, the fact that white people were ignorant of this stuff, they were victimized as well. You know,
Absolutely.
yeah. Um,
Absolutely.
you kind of touched on something that is extremely important that I'm glad you touched on it because I have a long question here for you that I wrote. Um, let's see, a writer whose name escapes me, okay, says that people, by and large, do not think in metaphors, which is a big thing to miss. I see Billy's story as a metaphor. You have the race, you have the giving blanket, you have the feathers, you have the circle, time as being circular. You know, can you just talk about your approach in collaborating with the illustrator, S.D. Nelson? Because, his work in this is really lovely.
Mm,
You're trying to get all this stuff and process all of this story that's real heavy, and trying to make it in such a way where you can relate to a child, it can relate to a child, and at the same time not lose anything in the visual. So we're dealing in a couple of different mediums. Did you feel like you were juggling?
Well, it might be interesting to know that with picture books, there's almost never contact between the author and the illustrator.
Mm-hmm.
All anything that the illustrator needs to know is filtered through the art director or the editor through to the author. So there wasn't a back and forth with SD. But they, as soon as there were sketches, they did run the sketches by me through my editor to make sure that everything looked historically accurate. That is critical. And so those sketches came through me and to Billy. And again, to make sure all is well. There was one scene, in fact, where there was a question about whether we could use that Confederate flag in one of those scenes.
Oh yeah, yeah.
We had to go back to Billy and say, "Do you remember seeing Confederate flags in in or near the campus at University of Kansas?"
Kansas, that's right. Yeah.
And he said, I don't remember specifically seeing it, but then his wife, who also was a KU student, said, "Oh yes, they were absolutely. I saw them." So we got to verify that they were there, and by some historical, there you go, historical imagery, we could confirm that. So in that regard, once the sketches were there, we could fact check. But other than that, everything was handled between the illustrator and the art director and the editor.
Mm. Well,
Interestingly, the way SD came into this project was itself sort of fated. I'd been a fan of SD's art and his books for years. So when I first set out to write this book about Billy, I even told my agent, SD Nelson needs to be the artist for this book. It's his art in my brain as I write this manuscript. So when the book finally went under contract after Billy was on board, I told my editor right off the bat, "I'm telling you right now, SD Nelson is the illustrator for this book." And she said, "Oh, we love his work, but we also want to see what other Native artists we can find who might even be better and another voice we can lift." So there was this broad search for Native artists who could do a good job with this type of story, with this particular style of writing. And I mean, countless names and samples were collected. And at the end of all of that, the publishing team decided that there was only one illustrator whose art was perfect for this text, and it was SD Nelson. So
mm,
it's rare that a picture book author gets their wish with an illustrator, but I definitely got my wish with SD, and he's been a huge champion of this book.
yeah, I mean
Spectacular.
the the illustrations are lovely. They're gentle. They're I don't want to say surreal, but it really brings you into a sense of place with the colors and just um, the emotional tenor of his work really kind of brings Billy Mills's story alive. Um, Let me see. I had some other questions here. Um, Billy is really, he's known for, that race, but, he also started the nonprofit, I think, um,
Running strong.
running strong for youth in his native,
American Indian
uh,
youth. Yes.
American Indian youth in his native, so South Dakota,
South Dakota.
South Dakota.
Yep.
Um, and, he described his journey as running towards himself, running towards Billy,
Mhm.
and that he, that was part of a race that started, long before Tokyo. Started as a child. He said that the story started when his mother died, and then his father passing at the age of, I think, did his mother pass at the age of 9? I think,
Yes.
yeah. This might sound like a silly question, but Um, we all have our races. What is your ultimate race in terms of what you're doing in your own life as a human being, as an artist? I mean, Billy has his race, and what's yours?
Oh my goodness. I mean, uh, writing definitely. I want to continue. You know what? Let me summarize this. I think my race is that I want to be here when I'm gone, right? We writers write, we're writing our legacy. It's the one thing that will be left when I've passed on, for my kids, for my future grandchildren. This is what's going to be left. They will be able to look back on my books or short stories or poetry, and without me being on the planet, they'll know who I was.
Yeah.
Even if I'm not writing about myself, what I've chosen to write about and the way I've written about it will tell them a lot about me. And somehow that is comforting. So in that writing journey, I think that is my race, to do my best work and to be as authentic and real and empathetic as possible.
And I think those things are very helpful as insofar as them being advice to people that want to take that step, because a lot of the people that we love are passing on, they're getting older, and we
Right.
want to get those stories, and then when they're gone and we don't get those stories, we feel a void, and it's very encouraging that that you uh, that you say that, that it can let people know that that it is possible. You got to put in the work, of course,
Absolutely.
but having that legacy, having known that you contributed something to our human family is certainly important. Um, I really just want to thank you so much for talking and pursuing Wings of an Eagle. I know you have other books as well. Um, the whole Billy Mills story, um, kind of impacted me profoundly. I mean, I would watch that race a lot for inspiration. And what it came down to me was that, as a person, um, what he did in what he did in that race wasn't just a race. We all want that Billy Mills moment in our life. And
Yeah.
it doesn't matter where we're at. We could be, on a racetrack, we could be anywhere, we could be on a city bus, but that that moment, that Billy Mills moment where, you know,
It looks like his feet don't touch the ground, doesn't it?
it almost kind of reminded me of like one of the Roadrunner cartoons where, the coyote's trying to catch the Roadrunner. He puts that dynamite thing and it was like he was completely fresh when he kicked. It was like that was like lap one. That was like he had
Right.
just started the race.
I'd swear I've watched those videos that you can on YouTube. You can find multiple different perspectives, footage of that race. I cry every single time that I watch it because it literally looks like those feet don't touch the ground, as
Yeah,
if he's been lifted up, and
yeah,
it's surreal, and it reminds me that moment, and knowing what we know about Billy's history, it I think the overall message, book aside, is that we can achieve more than other people think we can, and often we can achieve more than we think we can ourselves.
hmm
But we have to take a step. We have to commit. We have to do that hard work that makes us sweat. And he proved that, and he's an inspiration all the time.
yeah.
I'm crazy about
Because
him.
when I watched that, I'm like, well, God, how did that happen? And then and to hear the announcer, look at Mills, look at Mills. I think he says
He
it three
lost his
times.
job over that.
What's that?
That announcer lost his job over
Are
that
you
outburst.
serious?
Yeah,
But that was fantastic the way
it
he
was
did. Wait,
fantastic.
and then after he said the third look at Mills, then he howled. He was like, "Woo!" Right? It was
It was
like,
great.
"Oh,"
I
you know.
know.
It's like, I mean, the only thing I could compare it to was there was uh, a track. There was a runner who ran in Paris in the last Olympics. I forget his name, but he can't kind of came from behind too. The African American guy, I forget his name, and that was really that was um, really inspiring. And then the other one I could kind of compare it to is when Sugar Ray Leonard fought Tommy Hearns, and he was behind on all scorecards, and in the 14th round he found his Billy Mills moment in round 14 when it was almost like out of nowhere. because he was behind and he was losing that fight. And in round 14, Sugar Ray Leonard, uh, you know, he said, "Hey, this is mine. I'm taking this." And then there was another mo Billy Mills moment too. It was Riddick Bowe versus Evander Holyfield. I think the second fight, round 6, that was a Billy Mills moment right there. So Billy Mills is almost kind of like the measure of kind of overcoming for me, at least.
Right.
I see that it's more than athleticism, it's art and it's spirit, and it's like, as I'm not just as a person, but as I'm talking as my own gender, as a man. I think as men, we all want that. But a lot of times we fail, But but I always have my eyes open for that Billy Mills moment that it's
Yeah.
there. It can happen. We just have to be vulnerable and 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 let it happen.
I
Yeah.
also want to show some love to those people who don't finish first.
Hmm.
I shared this during the book launch for Wings of an Eagle. I cannot remember his name. The man who finished last was lapped so badly. He was the only runner on the track. And at first, the Japanese people, this again is 1964 Tokyo, were booing him, but he would not stop. He was again so lapped that he was alone, and it took, I don't remember how many minutes for him to finish this race. And by the time he got to the end, he was a national hero in Japan
Mm.
because he didn't stop. He
Yeah.
wasn't first across the finish line, but he finished. He crossed that finish line on his own 2 feet, and he became a hero.
Yeah.
Those people need to be celebrated too. We're not always going to be the gold medal winner,
Hmm.
but the fact that we just persevered
Hmm.
and showed up makes us a winner in our own right.
Well, since you mentioned that, the other thing too is, first and last, and the person that finishes last in the marathon is almost like the guy who finishes first.
Right.
It's like the very last event, right? He comes out, the very last. But the fact that he made it, it's almost like he came in, it's like he came in first. But
Right.
But again, this is Listen and Be Heard Radio. We've been talking with author Donna Janell Bowman. This has been a really wonderful, really uplifting discussion about your work and your approach, and you're connecting with Billy Mills. Again, Donna Janell Bowman, middle name spelled Janell, Donna Janell Bowman. Her website is donnajanellbowman.com. Um, any last words, maybe some things that you might be doing that you want to publicize, or if people want to get in touch with you or learn more about you?
Oh, well, anybody's welcome to reach out to me through my website. There's a contact form. I do have other projects in the works. Unfortunately, I can't talk about them yet.
Yeah,
Any
okay.
writers listening will understand.
All
There's a
right.
little bit of don't let the genie out of the bottle involved in this.
Hmm.
Um, and other than that, yes, so I have to be a little hush hush about it. But I do school visits and freelance editing. Writers do all kinds of things. We have lots of hats on at different
So,
times.
you do freelance editing. Do you
I do
do I guess developmental and
developmental,
developmental editing for novelists? Do you do novelists?
fiction and nonfiction.
Oh,
That's it.
fantastic. So if you have a book out and let's say you have a manuscript, you'd like somebody very capable to look at it and see what's right about it, what could be improved. Donna Janelle Bowman, author and also an editor, can look at your work. Again, DonnaJanelleBowman.com. Donna, thank you so much. This has been really, really wonderful and really fantastic. Again, my name is Tony Robles. This is Listen and Be Heard Radio for readers and writers. Again, if you're checking us out on YouTube, do, you know, uh, hit the subscribe button. We want to get at least 1,000 subscribers, which isn't a big number, but to us, it's a big number. Help us out. And once again, thank you, thank you, Donna Janelle Bowman. And we're going to kick it back to the studio and Martha. Thank you.